I'm Joseph.
And I'm Nick.
This is Fish Jelly.
Yes, well, yes, it is.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Okay.
Oh, yeah?
Election day is in 2 days.
Yeah.
Very exciting.
That's a word for it, sure.
I hope people are, if they haven't already voted, planning on voting.
We both already have.
Yeah, we did our mail-in ballots. And I like to do that. Well, it's easy to avoid. It's nice to avoid a line, but also it gives time to read through the ballot because there are a lot of things on it to sift through and make decisions about. And I was thinking, because then I was curious about voter turnout.
Mm-hmm.
And for presidential elections, the turnout is like between like 55 and 60% through the years of voting eligible people who actually exercise that right, which seems, I mean, that's a lot of people, but also that's a lot of people who don't vote.
Yep.
And which, I don't know, it's just like, how do you convince people that their vote matters? And I wonder if maybe part of it is that I don't think people realize all the things that are on the ballot. There are a lot of different positions that need decisions on, a lot of propositions.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean,
what
there is a lot at stake every ballot. And it's not just the presidential elections. It's midterm stuff, special elections, local elections. People's vote is important.
Yes, I agree. What floors me, though, is that, it's hard to motivate a large section of the populace to go to the polls. But also when you do, if you walk in completely ignorant, reading through some of these things, and also it's not clear what people stand for that you're voting for in certain categories. And it'd be really nice if one day they put out some kind of comprehensive that's available at the poll.
So that's a good point. And I wanted for people, because there are a lot of people, according to the statistics, there are tens of millions of people who can vote and just choose not to. For those people, now at this point it's too late to, well, I think as long as ballots are received within 5, I think, days after the election, they're counted. So if you have one at home that you haven't looked at, sit at your computer or, sit at the kitchen table with your phone and you can look up some of this stuff, which is what I do because I certainly don't keep up enough to know all of this stuff offhand. I have to go and research. So I sit at my desk with my desktop computer open and I just start Googling.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
But if that seems overwhelming to people, which I know it does because I've heard people say that they don't like voting because there are too many things to vote for, then I would like to either remind people or let them know for the first time that you don't have to vote for everything. And I would encourage you not to vote for things you don't understand because that could make it worse.
That's true.
So if there are 30 items on the ballot, like let's say for this election, you can just go in and vote for president. You can leave all the others blank. You don't have to fill in anything. It's not going to say required or you can't submit. You can just vote for one or two things. So hopefully that alleviates some tension. But yeah, I mean, I was looking at, so it seems like the greatest turnout was kind of a tie between when JFK ran against Nixon.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 2020 with Biden and Trump. Those were the two that had, I think, almost equivalent turnout.
Wow.
But it's funny because that's percentage, not numbers.
Mm-hmm.
So like 63% showed up. But back in 1960, when it was JFK and Nixon, there were less than half the voting eligible population. So at like, in 2020, I think it was like 210 million people or 240, maybe something like that. And back in 1960, it was only 110. So that's wild that the percentage is similar, but the amount of people who could vote was more than double. So, I mean, it's just so crazy that so many people don't vote. But, you can just Google, where do I vote? Like at this point, because it's so close to the election, but moving forward, you can get mail-in ballots sent to your home. Mm-hmm. And if you do that, you get sample ballots before so that you can do research.
True, but we have all these younger people voting now in droves, and they are technologically savvy, so maybe there's less distress
Hopefully,
with younger voters
hopefully.
looking up information, hopefully.
But the first time I took voting seriously and like really sat down and like read about these different propositions and what they mean, and then there are websites which I don't want to say which to go to because you should find your own truth, but you can go to websites that will break down
Yes, you can.
because it'll like you almost go through like a widget, like a profile where it says like what are the things you believe in? Are you pro-choice? Do you believe in same sex? Like all the key things, and then it will spit out, oh, in your, because you give it your zip code, and it will say, oh, in your area, what you're going to be voting for, these are the propositions and how you should vote. These are the people who you should vote for. I mean, if you trust that, or if it can be sort of like a reference to make your own decision, there are a lot of resources to help. But again, for people who don't vote, I don't think they realize all the things that are on the ballot that affect you directly, like very specific propositions that affect you on. And it is a lot of word soup, but if you take the time, it is clear, like this proposition is to spend this amount of money to do these things. Do you agree? Yes or no?
Yeah.
So I think it's important.
But that's why I like voting by mail, because you can take your
Right.
time.
Which is why someone like, I'm going to segue a little bit, but Cardi B, endorsed Kamala Harris, but she had said before Kamala decided to run, she was not going to vote because she didn't want to vote for Biden. And I don't know, I just said you shouldn't vote for things that you don't understand. So sure, these local propositions and local, judges and district attorneys and law enforcement people who you don't recognize, sure, don't vote for them if you haven't done your research. But it's hard to think that a Cardi B didn't have enough information about Joe Biden and Donald Trump to make a decision. So I don't quite understand that. And I think that there is always a better option for you, whatever that is. And you should use your voice and your vote to choose the best option for you. I don't know how it makes sense to have an opinion about something and not, again, for candidates, for propositions, whatever that you don't understand, of course, don't make a decision that could hurt you. But like the president, that's confusing to me. Well, like, our entire news cycle is all about it. Like, how do you not have an opinion?
I mean, someone like Cardi B making that statement, that's itself is like a political statement, right?
But I wanted to talk about Harrison Ford.
He's alive.
He's alive, and he made a video endorsing Kamala Harris. And I want to read what he wrote because it really spoke to me. He said, I've been voting for 64 years, never really wanted to talk about it very much, but when dozens of former members of the Trump administration are sounding alarms saying, for God's sake, don't do this again, you have to pay attention. The truth is, Kamala Harris will protect your right to disagree with her about policies or ideas, and then, as we have done for centuries, we'll debate them, we'll work on them together, and we'll move forward. And I thought that was a really nice statement to make.
Well, compared to what Mel Gibson said, yeah.
And then Crowe Grace Moretz.
Good old Crowe.
Did you read about her post?
No.
Okay, this is what she posted. So she posted on Instagram a picture of her I voted early sticker, and this is what she wrote. I voted early and I voted for Kamala Harris. There is so much on the line this election. I believe the government has no right over my body as a woman, and the decisions over my body should come only from myself and my doctor. Kamala Harris will protect that for us. I believe in the need for legal protections that protects the LGBTQ plus community as a gay woman. We need protections in this country and to have access to the care we need and deserve. So she says she's a gay woman now.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, good for Crowe.
Good for her.
Yeah, I appreciate her. She acted alongside Isabel. I love,
But if you're inspired to vote, just Google where do I vote and go there. And
Well, I find it funny that the Republicans are trying to back away about the rolling back Roe versus Wade because.
Child, they made a mistake.
Because now I think women have realized that we have to think about this again, and that really is going to dictate who I vote for.
Talking about another woman, So we all know Anita Bryant. She was that anti-gay activist, if you want to call her that.
She's a bitch, is what she was. A useless
But
bitch.
she's like a former beauty queen who went on like this parade of anti-gay rhetoric, specifically like saving the. From what I recall, I didn't look this
yes,
up.
but
she was aligning like
gays
homosexuals with child
recruiting
molestation
children.
and like recruiting children, and so her campaign was like save our children from the gays.
And she was the orange juice queen.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
she's still alive. And her granddaughter, Sarah Green, is a whole ass Lebesian. So her granddaughter was on some podcast talking about it and saying that she was debating whether or not she should invite her grandmother to her wedding, her lesbian wedding.
She should, and she should get a pie in the face.
So I thought that was interesting. Another story I saw that I thought was interesting. There's this 83-year-old man, a priest, who retired from being a priest to do pornography.
Wait, how old is he?
Currently, the article I read is, I think right now he's like 85.
This is a recent transition?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But I
got some blue pills going, I guess.
Well, I watched, because there's a video of him talking about it and then showing his pornography. So I watched it. And, you know, it's interesting, the comments he makes.
So he's spry.
Yeah. I mean, he's, yeah.
Is this alone solo work, or
no?
Does he have collabs?
No, the two videos I watched, there were like he was engaging with other people and having penetrative sex. And so he was, but they were like tasteful. And he says he gives all the money to the church. Like,
oh my God.
But he's not a priest anymore, but like he doesn't make them, whatever money he's getting, he's not, and that he's not charging to make the video. So whatever money he's getting from them, he will put it towards that. But he just talks about being sex positive and that, I mean, he does say something about how sex can bring people closer to God. And I'm sure people would have a lot to say about all this.
I think Sting would agree.
But the main thing I took away from it was it would be nice. I'm not I don't consume pornography to any degree that I should have a say in much of it, except that I think that it would be nice if this isn't already the trend, which I assume it is based on how popular like OnlyFans and stuff like that is, to see other kinds of bodies, like that people can see themselves in these sex workers and people who make adult videos.
Oh yeah, for content. Sure. Mm-hmm.
So that it's not all these muscly.
Well, yeah, just because you reach a certain age doesn't mean that you stop having desires or yearnings.
So it's nice to see, you know, like older people with, you know, who are larger in size, shorter, you know, like, I mean, just all kinds of bodies doing this kind of work. People can see themselves in it.
The donating the proceeds to the church. I think I had just read The Lonely Passion of Judith Hearn, and there's bitchy gossip in there about a brothel madam who, to achieve kind of absolution, begins to give money to the church, and the church won't. In Ireland, the church wouldn't take her money.
Anyway, if people are interested in seeing his pornography, his name is Norm Self, SELF. Moving on to the restaurant section, we tried a new restaurant last week called Desert Rose.
Mm-hmm.
It's in Los Feliz. It's like Mediterranean type food.
Speaking of Sting,
we've watched, yeah. That song when it came out, Sting's Desert Rose. Oh my God, that was on. I bought the CD just for that one song.
So did my mother. Yeah,
that I would play on repeat. But anyway, this restaurant's in Los Feliz, and we've passed it many times. Mm-hmm. Usually on the way to home, there's a restaurant called Home that's very trendy. The food's pretty good at Home, but I think it's more just that it's a cute place to go.
It is cute, yeah.
That it's popular, and it's the restaurant itself looks like a big house.
Yeah.
But anyway, we're talking about Desert Rose. So the other night we needed to eat after a movie, I believe. Right? What were we doing that we had to eat kind of late?
It was after a film.
Mm-hmm. So we drive over there to that area, and the restaurant we were thinking about, I think, was closed or it was busy. So then we see Desert Rose, and it was dead to the point where I thought they were closed.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my first signal that I shouldn't go in there. But we did it because we were hungry and it was open. What did you think of Desert Rose?
The service was nice.
Sure.
The food was mid, and that was about it. It wasn't there was really nothing special whatsoever about it.
Yeah, for being like such a nice location, and the outdoor area is nicer than the interior
Yeah,
seating.
but it was cold.
And it was very cold, yeah. Well, very cold for Los Angelinos like us. But the food, I thought it was very overpriced for what it was. You ordered some kind of noodle
Pappardelle,
with short rib,
short rib. Yep.
and that shit tasted like one notch above Hamburger Helper.
Yeah.
To the point where I think you were frustrated because then you decided to come home the next day and make it yourself.
Yes. Well, I've been making pappardelle with Swedish meatballs, but yeah.
And then I ordered some falafel sandwich, which was fine.
Yeah, it was fine, but you could get something cheaper that tastes better from a taco truck, or not taco truck, from some kind of food truck that peddles the same wares.
So sorry to Desert Rose. I would not be going back there, except maybe for happy hour. I would try that out. And then we've talked about Figaro Bistro before, but we went there, which is down the street from Desert Rose. But we went Halloween night after our Child's Play 3 live. And the server was kind of funky. She seemed like she'd rather be anywhere but there.
Yeah.
But we ordered our food, ate it, and then we wanted dessert. So you went up. They have a dessert case. You went up and ordered a few things.
Two things.
But when the server brought them out, she goes, "You ready for more?" Like,
yeah, because she had to warm up the bread pudding.
But she said it like, "You two pigs." That bread pudding was hot.
It was very warm.
It was good.
It retained the heat, yes.
But whatever chemicals are in that bread pudding, it retained the heat.
The molecules were very condensed in that bread, yes.
Like if you want to keep your coffee hot, you can just put it on top of that bread pudding.
But it was okay. And then it was a pistachio cheesecake, which was also...
It was good, but if you wouldn't have if it weren't green and you hadn't have told me it was pistachio, I would have just thought it's cheesecake.
Yeah, true.
But it was good. Films released we didn't cover. Cellar Door.
This looked interesting. Well, I like Scott Speedman and Lawrence Fishburne. I don't like Jordana Brewster, but she's in it too.
God.
But
you complained about spoiler for people on Patreon. One of the movies we watched for fun was the Fast and Furious X, the 10th
Fast
one.
10. Mm-hmm.
Oh my God! All you did was complain about that lady.
Oh God, I can't stand her. Well, she's not the only one I can't stand in that. But
anyway, Cellar Door.
It's a suspense thriller, but what it has going against it is it's also directed by a man named Von Stein. And we reviewed Mr. Stein's last film, which was terrible. Inheritance, that one with Simon Pegg being locked up and looking all crazy and shaggy.
Oh, and like a senator's daughter.
Lily Collins, yeah. Mm-hmm. So again, I'll probably see that eventually, but
Chasing Amy?
Chasing Amy.
Oh, I thought that was a typo. Sorry. Chasing Amy.
This is a documentary from a young LGBTQ plus filmmaker named Sav Rogers. And I believe it's about it's a documentary about their experiences with the Kevin Smith film Chasing Amy, and how I think this was kind of a life raft for them in the 90s. I think that movie was like 97. But, if you don't remember this film, it's very divisive. It has a very divisive place in queer cinema of the 90s. But because, of course, it's from Kevin Smith. In my opinion, one of his better films, because you can at least watch it again. But I'd be interested in seeing this. This sounds like something very personal and meaningful.
The Gutter.
I had sent you an email from the publicist about this, but we didn't get around to it. It's directed by Isaiah and Yasser Lester. As the title suggests, it's a bowling comedy, but it stars Shamik Moore and has a really interesting supporting cast, including Jack A. Harry, Susan Sarandon, and Jay Ellis.
You know why I didn't choose it? Because I remember you sending this to me and I was interested, but had I known Jack A. Harry was in it, because the poster doesn't have her picture or her name.
Okay.
So, but then I saw that your notes do. I would have totally watched it solely for Jack A. Harry.
Well, we still can watch it.
Yeah.
But I guess Susan Sarandon plays a Karen type, of course. But yeah, I don't know. Oh, and Paul Reiser is in it too. But yeah, it's probably I probably know what it's going to be like. But that cast is pretty good.
A Real Pain.
I saw this out of Sundance, and in a world with more time, we probably would have covered this too. But it's directed by Jesse Eisenberg and stars Kieran Culkin, and I believe they're cousins that are getting together to do a concentration camp tour.
You watched this.
Part of
so
it,
I
yeah.
remember part of it, yeah.
Yes, and I think their dead grandmother, who had survived, if I'm remembering correctly, I watched this in January. She had given them the money for them to take this odyssey together. And then Eisenberg is, of course, playing a type A personality, which is very much up his alley. And Kieran Culkin is more of this wild child, off the rails type that causes chaos amongst the people on this tour. One of whom is played by Jennifer Grey, who is always nice to see. I thought it was fine. And I think if you like either of these people, I actually was invited to an intimate dinner with several other press members with Culkin and Eisenberg, which I turned down.
I do like Kieran Culkin, though.
I do too. I feel like Eisenberg, I don't need to meet in person.
Lastly, soundtrack to a coup d'etat.
Yes, this I missed somewhere, but I have a screener for it right now because it's award season. So I might watch this. I hope to watch that this week. It's directed by Johan Grimmenprez, and it is about a Cold War episode that led musicians Abbey Lincoln and Max Roach to crash the UN Security Council in protest against the murder of Patrice Lumumba. There's a film about Lumumba too that I have not seen.
Oh, and you know Patrice O'Neill.
Mm-hmm.
He's named after Patrice Lumumba.
Yeah. There's a movie by Raoul Peck that I've been meaning to watch forever as well. But there's a whole bunch of archival footage from many people you will recognize, including Malcolm X and Nina Simone. But Abbey Lincoln, I talked about her lately because she's an excellent film called Nothing But a Man. I think that is must see, especially if you would like to see some actual positive representation of black actors in the 60s. But that was put on Criterion recently. But yeah, I am highly interested in this. And especially for upcoming awards voting, I probably should watch it.
For people who don't know, Patrice O'Neill is a comedian. He's one of my favorites.
Excellent. He
died.
A lot.
We do. He died very young. He had health issues, including diabetes. So he died he was younger than I am now. But I think he only has 2 comedy albums, and they're kind of like things people piece together, I think, from comedy shows that had audio recordings. So we're lucky to have those. But I think I could listen to him on repeat all day, every day.
Which, just from putting it together that he was named after Lumumba, he has one of my favorite bits of his is Tolu.
Yes, if you go look up his comedy specials, there's a bit titled Tolu. Oh my gosh.
Where he drags this man.
This black African man's name.
But I hate that name. And you know what? I bet that he has very specific feelings based on
he talks about how he's named, that if his crazy ass aunties would have had it their way, he would have been named Patrice Lumumba. Anyway, projects of interest. Chris Rock is directing a movie.
Yes, that is called Mavis. Is it Mavis Green?
Misty Green?
Misty Green. It's something about following an actress around and making it happen for her. He hasn't directed movies since Top 5, I believe, which I remember really liking, but it was not a hit at the box office. And then, of course, it's Chris Rock's fault that we have Boo from Tyler Perry. But I don't know. Of course, this is worth waiting for. And I believe Neon is the distributor.
Who's the gentleman who directed Godzilla -1?
Japanese director.
He announced that there's a new Godzilla movie in the works.
I thought that just announced.
Yeah.
Oh, but I thought that was I mean, come on.
I mean, it's a given.
I thought that was a given.
But I think it's like in full swing, maybe. That's why it made the news. Anyway, I just wrote that down because I really enjoyed Godzilla -1.
Takashi Yamazaki.
Next, Paper Tiger.
James Gray is directing a new film, and he's reuniting with Anne Hathaway, who had a role in Armageddon Time. I believe that role was meant for somebody else, and she stepped on last minute, if I'm remembering correctly. Or that could have been the Todd Haynes film she was in. Anyway, Adam Driver and Jeremy Strong. Jeremy Strong, you just saw him play Roy Cohn. So that should be pretty good. I like James Gray quite a bit.
The Journeyman.
Tarsem is working on a new film, and he's got Dev Patel headlining. I just had a conversation with somebody about Tarsem because they just re-released The Fall, his 2006 film, which is a visual feast, and I highly recommend it. I didn't realize, because I saw that when it came out in theaters, I didn't realize that had been unavailable for so long, but that could be a fun thing to rewatch. I've been meaning to rewatch The Cell for forever, but the problem I've always had with Tarsem's films is that they're beautiful, stunning visual spectacles, but kind of like dead in the head. The Fall, I think, is probably his best film, but the person I was talking to told me that, because I haven't read this, so this is filtered through hearsay, but apparently Tarsem had approached Criterion about releasing The Fall, and he was turned down, which I find kind of crazy. But anyway.
Is there a George Clinton project coming?
Eddie Murphy is going to play George Clinton.
Oh.
And it's going to be directed by Bill Condon, which I don't know how. Bill Condon, of course, directed Dreamgirls.
So they have a relationship.
So those two have a relationship, but Bill Condon is very hit or miss. He did, 2 of those goddamn Twilight movies. I don't love Bill Condon, but anyway, again, why would you want to do a George Clinton biopic? Except whatever, it's probably going to be fast tracked because it's them. I think a different director could do probably something more interesting, but whatever.
Onslaught.
Adam Wingard, who is also a director to me, who's in the Doghouse and sees Sold Out and done these talking about Godzilla films, the last 2 terrible, awful Godzilla Kong bullshit films, but he still did something like You're Next and The Guest, which I loved, and he's reuniting with his usual scribe, I believe, Simon Barrett, and Dan Stevens, again playing a German like he did in Cuckoo, and Adriana Arjona, who you just saw in Hitman. This sounds like a creature feature type thriller that hopefully should be a return to form for someone like Mr. Wingard.
Lastly, The Housekeeper.
I haven't really liked a film by Richard Eyre in a while either, but he did do Notes on a Scandal, which I think Cate Blanchett and Judi Dench are quite thrilling in. Very psychosexual, psycho bitty way. But The Housekeeper is his latest project that's set to star Anthony Hopkins and Uma Thurman. It's based on a book that apparently is trying to tell what inspired Daphne du Maurier to write Rebecca, which is interesting to me. Anyway.
Unfortunately, there is an entry in the obituary section. Teri Garr died.
Yeah.
I know who this is. She died at the age of 79 from complications from multiple sclerosis.
Yeah.
If I had to go off the top of my head, I would say I remember her from Tootsie.
Yes.
But I definitely know who she is, and
well,
she's done a lot.
I'm sure you saw Mr. Mom.
Well, a lot of things run together for me
with Michael Keaton.
Okay,
where she goes to work and he's at home with the kids.
I'm familiar with the movie, but I don't remember her in it, and I remember the conversation, but I don't remember her in it.
Yeah, she's in that. She's also in Young Frankenstein.
I don't recall that movie. I don't think I've seen Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Oh yeah.
And then she's in Dumb and Dumber.
Mm-hmm.
Pret-a-Porter we need to watch.
Yes, I've been Brenda Porter. Yeah, I've been wanting to watch Ready to Wear for a while now, but
I always thought she seemed like a really nice lady. Like she has a very nice face.
yes, and I always thought that she should have won if they were going to give a Best Supporting Actress statue to someone from Tootsie. To me, it should have been her over Jessica Lange. And we talked about this probably more at length in the podcast we did on Frances, because Jessica got passed over for Meryl Streep and Sophie's Choice, blah, blah, blah. But I think that Teri should have won for that. But yeah.
Oh, well, goodbye to Teri Garr. Do you have a favorite film of hers you can think of?
Well, favorite performances, I think Tootsie, what I've already said, Tootsie, Mr. Mom, and Young Frankenstein. I was if it had been my week to choose a secret film, I probably would have done something with her, because there's a whole bunch of stuff from the 80s that she did that I haven't seen. I think her biggest films are still from the 70s.
Well, speaking of secret films, this week was my choice. And I chose the 2023 American crime thriller Woman of the Hour, directed by and starring Anna Kendrick. Why did I choose this movie? Because I think it was 2 weeks ago or last week.
I think it was last week.
Last week, when we were talking about films released we didn't cover, you brought this one up. And I said that I had confused Anna Kendrick with Anne Hathaway. And that I was excited to see this movie until I realized it wasn't Anne Hathaway. And then at the end, I said something about I don't give a damn about no Anne Hathaway or Anna Kendrick.
Mm-hmm.
So then I felt bad. And then I saw that this movie was popular on Netflix.
I think you were, correct me if I'm wrong, we're going to choose between this and another film from Netflix last week called Don't Move.
Yeah, the Sam Raimi produced film, but then I read the premise and was reading reviews, and then I felt like I knew how I was going to feel about it.
I only brought that up because it has the same cinematographer as this film, Zach Cooperstein.
I felt like it'd be more interesting to talk about this movie.
Yeah, I think that you made a good choice. And, I think you forget that you have liked Anna Kendrick in a couple things, including that film Stowaway, which we gave a glowing review to that people were very upset about, I remember.
I don't have negative thoughts about Anna Kendrick. I think it's just I always think about Anne Hathaway when I see her name.
Mm-hmm.
So then I'm disappointed when it's not Anne Hathaway. But I don't really check for Anne Hathaway either, so I don't know why I care about either.
No, I've come around on Anne Hathaway, though, after Eileen and She Came to Me.
But I also now feel like I don't mind Anne Hathaway or Anna Kendrick.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what is Woman of the Hour about? Cheryl Bradshaw, a single woman looking for a suitor on a hit 1970s TV show, chooses charming bachelor Rodney Alcala, unaware that behind the man's gentle facade, he hides a deadly secret. Okay, so this movie's based on the true story of a serial killer named Rodney Alcala,
mm-hmm.
who was ultimately convicted of killing, I think he was convicted of 5.
I thought it was 7, but
murders, 5 or 7, sentenced to death in California. But some people, based on some stuff I think he was convicted of 5 murders, but he was conclusively linked to 8 murders.
Oh, okay. All right.
But he was only tried for the 5. And then I guess based on like technology with DNA and remains, that he could be responsible for up to 130 murders.
Yeah, I thought I read somewhere, I think like a woman they thought was murdered by the Boston Strangler or something like that was actually him.
But so this story is about him. So the movie is kind of split into 2 stories. The first is this guy Rodney Alcala, who's played by Daniel Zovatto.
Yes.
Did you recognize him?
No, but I think he's probably aged quite a well. He's significantly older than since Don't Breathe, but I think he looks similar to how he did in a terrible Russell Crowe film called The Pope's Exorcist.
I think he's more attractive than the actual man.
Oh, for sure.
Which is interesting. But this guy, Rodney, he brutalizes and kills women. We see him do it twice.
The opening kind of reminded me because I knew what it was about, but it still is effectively chilling, and we can talk about why. But it reminded me of the opening of Zodiac, the Fincher film.
Well, we can talk about it, but just to tell the basic story. So we see Rodney kill 2 women, and then he picks up a third woman. And his little sort of shtick is that he says, "I'm a photographer, and here's my work. I'd love to shoot you." And then he has a place like out in the desert he likes to take them. That's the opening of the film, is the first lady being killed in the desert. So then we see that he finds this like 15-year-old girl and says, "You're really pretty. I want to take your photos." She agrees because she's homeless, gets into his car, and they drive out to the desert. And then that's sort of the beginning of the film. And then in the end, we see what happens with that young girl is that he does brutalize her, because his thing was he would like to get them close to death, or like he would strangle them until they pass out and then resuscitate them or let them revive themselves and then do it again. So he was torturing them before he would assault them and murder them. But
Did that remind you of Copycat at all?
no.
Oh, Sigourney has a speech about she has like broken hyaloid bone.
Oh, God. But that 15-year-old girl in the end, we see that she wakes up from being tied up and brutalized, but she flips the script on him. She plays some psychological games, which I think her probably living on the streets.
Yeah.
She was hip to the game. So what does she tell this man when she revives? She goes, "Oh, promise not to tell anyone what we did. I'll be so embarrassed."
Last night was really crazy. Like it was her fault.
Yeah. So she was smart because she made it seem like she was the one who did the bad thing. So you can see in his face that he's kind of shocked, and he goes, "Okay, I won't." He unties her. They get in the car, and then they hit an intersection where there's another man driving, and that might have been her opportunity to ask for help, but she doesn't. So that fully disarms the killer. So his dumbass stops at a gas station and gets out the car, goes to the bathroom. He's in the bathroom for a long time because he's trying to clean his hands that are covered in blood. And during that time, she runs off to a restaurant, calls the police, and they arrest him. Okay, but the middle part of the film is that during his killing spree, he took a brief break to go on to the dating game.
I don't know how much of a break he took, but
well, you know what I mean? Like he
Yeah.
took the day off from
Yeah.
murdering fools to go on this show as a bachelor. So the way the show works is there's a bachelorette, and that's Anna Kendrick's character, and then she has to choose from 3 bachelors. So Anna Kendrick is this aspiring actress living in LA who's not having any luck. And she's at her wit's end. She calls her agent like, "You know what? I'm about to quit this shit and move back to wherever the hell I came from." And her agent says, "Oh, no, wait. I just booked you for a gig on Friday, like a guest spot on a TV show." "Really?" "Yeah, but I didn't audition." "It's okay. I sent in your stuff." "Okay, well, what is it?" "The dating game." So she goes, "Well, I'll do it because," and remembering this is the 70s, she knows that the actress Sally Field was discovered on the dating game. So she thinks that maybe this would be a good way to get exposure. So she agrees to go. And then for the middle portion of the film, we see the taping of that show. And I think, we can talk about the differences from reality, but we see Anna Kendrick ask all the questions of the bachelors, and it is Rodney's interaction with Anna that's the best. So she chooses him. They win a trip to Carmel, like in the future. But after the show, like as she's leaving the stage or the studio, Rodney like approaches her and says, "Hey, maybe we should get to know each other before we go on this trip. Do you want to go for a drink now?" Anna agrees. But during their little date at this bar, she kind of gets creeped out by him and then says she wants to go back. And then she gives him a fake phone number. He recognizes that it's fake. And then she tells him, "Yeah, you and I are never going anywhere together." And then he gets mad. And they're like walking in this empty parking lot behind the studio. And just as you think he's about to assault her, some of the crew walk out. So Anna Kendrick's character is able to get away. And then we see her packing up her apartment to move back home. So she narrowly, in this film, it seems, avoided his wrath, but then he went on to kill more people. So the chronology of the movie is kind of all over the place. And we only learn about his additional killings at the end when we get Copy telling us that.
Mm-hmm.
I thought this movie was excellent.
Yeah, I was very impressed, not just because it's a Netflix release, but I was uneasy the whole time, really. Like I felt, and I think what Kendrick does that's really good is highlight in ways that are both obvious and subtle, like this pervasive violence against women. There's this constant threat that it seemed like we were all just kind of complicit with.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Because this is not like a mystery thriller, suspense thriller where it's like, well, who's the killer and how are they going to catch him? We know that from the very first scene who the killer is. So we're just watching him sort of move about, which we'll get to. But I think the strength of the story is just this constant realization, like, of all the misogyny that these women have to endure.
Like it's everywhere because we meet Kendrick. Well, so the opening scene I thought was very troubling, as you should, right? I think
Rodney and this lady are in the desert.
and he's giving a photo shoot, and he's asking her to be herself and blah blah blah, pretend a camera's not there, and she is allowing herself to be vulnerable and she breaks down talking about how she had been on a travel plan with her boyfriend who's broken up with her, and clearly this is something she hasn't processed, and she's like, I'm sorry, I haven't talked about this with anyone yet. And then of course he just starts to strangle her, and it's like
Well, then he strangles her, she passes out, and then he resuscitates her.
yeah.
That was the most upsetting part to me.
Well, yeah, he's playing it, but I think what showing it was a very effective in allowing this person to seem human right away, and then what is troubling is watching this human be senselessly killed, where a lot of films I don't think even take the time to do that.
Then we immediately cut to Anna Kendrick at a casting call, and there are these two creepy casting guys who are talking about her like she's not even in the room, sort of talking about her body in a way that's really inappropriate, dismissive of her. They're not even like paying attention to her. And then they dismiss her like clearly they're not interested because she doesn't want to show her breasts.
I was reading that apparently Kendrick injected some reality of how her own breasts have been talked about by some casting director.
Then we see that she has a neighbor. And at first, the neighbor is this very affable guy who initially almost came across as gay to me.
I thought so too, because
he's so nice, and he's like, he just comes into her apartment and he's like, they're having a gab sesh, and you can tell that she's kind of like, okay, girl, like.
Well, he's kind of John Ritter-esque.
And I thought he reminded me of John Ritter, and he's like, well, how'd the audition go? Because he's an actor as well. And I guess he was running lines with her and she was saying thank you. But then we find out that the only reason he's being nice to her is because he wants to have sex with her.
Uh-huh.
And she finally agrees to go have a drink with him to celebrate after she's told that she's been cast on the dating game. And then he makes a move on her at the bar, and she kind of reacts negatively, but then she feels bad.
Yeah, because he closes off right away.
So then she goes home with him and has sex with him. And again, like, I just think like every scene is exemplifying how women are sort of either disrespected or pressured.
Yeah.
Which I think some of the best writing is Anna Kendrick as Cheryl, when she's on the dating game, the questions she's giving her, the questions she's given to ask the men are all these stupid, fluffy, sexist questions.
Mm-hmm.
So halfway through, she decides to write her own questions. And I thought that like 10-minute segment where she's going off script was really good.
I agree.
And the best question was that she says, what are girls for? Like, she asks each of the bachelors, what are girls for? And the first two give, the stupid answer you would expect. But then bachelor number 3, Rodney, the serial killer, who's been giving all the best answers, when it's his turn, he says, well, I guess it's up for the girl to decide, which of course is the answer she wanted. But I think that's, that's very much the message of the movie.
Well, and that
is how women are seen and what they're good for, and how it seems like some men think they can use women in this way.
Well, and how the script presents it this way, and her being allowed to do that, and kind of his access to her is granted through the right questions, felt very much like a fairy tale. Like the riddle of a fairy tale, like actually. You answered the right questions.
Well, speaking of that, so the host of the show is played by a guy I recognize.
Tony Hale. You've seen him in all kinds of stuff, and he does some great voice work as well.
But of course, he's like a sexist D-bag. And he's talking about Anna like in the makeup trailer, like saying like, oh, she's pretty, but we need to accentuate her positives, like get her in a different dress, something tighter. And then the hair and makeup ladies are really nice to Anna.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're just being very nice and sort of making her feel at ease. And it's actually that makeup lady, the older one,
mm-hmm.
who tells Anna halfway through the show, like, girl, if you don't like these questions, ask different ones. It's not like they're going to fire you. You're only on one episode. Like, who cares if the host doesn't like you? But I really, I like that makeup lady because then she goes, after Anna does a few of the questions, then they take another makeup break. And Anna asked the makeup lady, well, what do you think of my questions? And she's like, well, I think they're good because they're asking, because really what you're asking is the question under the question. So like what you said, the riddle. And then Anna's like, well, what is that? And the old lady says, well, you're trying to determine which one of them will hurt you.
Yeah.
So I think that feels very, I mean, it's very upsetting, but very true. That I think a lot of people who are out here dealing with men,
mm-hmm.
you know, cis women, trans women, I think you have to really be careful. Like,
well, other gay men.
And
there's an accepted amount of like predatory behavior that I think we all deal with.
Vulnerable populations, yeah. I think some people have to really be careful and constantly think about like, how do I move about in a way that I can feel most safe?
Well, and also how do I get my needs met while also being safe?
But what's most disturbing about that is there are a lot of people out there who don't ever have to think about that, namely like straight men.
Mm-hmm.
who don't ever feel threatened. They're like the apex predator.
Mm-hmm.
So I found that moment with the makeup lady telling her like, well, really what you're doing is asking the question under the question to be pretty eerie.
Yeah.
Okay. So during the taping of the dating game, at one point, because Rodney, the killer, is wiping the floor with these other two dum-dums.
Mm-hmm.
And one time during a break, or no, it's at the end of the taping, like right before they're about to announce the winner, that bachelor number 2 gets into it with Rodney.
Mm-hmm.
Like basically saying like, I'm going to meet you outside and we're going to fight.
Mm-hmm.
And Rodney says, well, let's exchange information so we know where to find each other. And the guy's like, kind of like, oh, wow, okay. So the dummy gives Rodney his like address. And then Rodney shows that man a picture of a woman he had assaulted.
Well, she looked murdered.
Or murdered.
Yeah.
So then so that bachelor number 2 is creeped out.
And then Alcala eats that picture.
He sure does. Then when the host announces the winner, of course, before he brings out the other 2 bachelors, when bachelor number 2 comes out, he whispers in Anna's ear, like, be careful with that asshole.
Mm-hmm.
So that already has her like on high alert. But what really sends her, because we see that she talks about having bad luck with dating and not feeling comfortable around men, and she even says like she's trying to not focus on dating at all. So the fact that she even agreed to go have a drink with Rodney after the taping is a big deal for her. But we can see that the tides turn because Rodney's being like extra nice to her, like trying to say like, oh, her soul.
She's got a Patti Smith vibe.
He's just doing too much.
Mm-hmm.
And she can sort of smell the bullshit. So she tells him, oh, you're like kind of far out with these ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see a shift in him, like he feels offended. And then she's uneasy.
Well, and it's a mirror to the scene we'd already seen her with a man in the bar, where she did something where, as somebody says in this film, men are big babies. He just is crestfallen.
Yeah. But then I was after, because then now that the mood has changed, that's when Rodney says, well, he tells the waitress, let me get 2 more Mai
And
Tais.
this is after she declined to have another drink.
Yes. So she said, I don't want any more alcohol. And then he tries to order 2 more. But he's looking at the waitress, and then the waitress looks at Anna, and Anna shakes her head no. So then the waitress goes, oh, you know what? We just had last call. Sorry, no more drinks. But then I was trying to look up because I knew there was like a symbol or a sign for women at bars who need help. And apparently, if a person who's in an uncomfortable situation at a bar or restaurant, if the server or takes their order and the person asks for an angel shot, that's supposed to mean that they need help.
Which I was completely ignorant of.
I knew there was something you're supposed to say. And then I also know that there's some sort of hand gesture that if you see a woman make, that means she needs help. And I was trying to look that up, and I'm not sure if I found the right one, because there's this universal sign for help that's like you close your
Thumb,
like your 4 fingers over your thumb, like a fist facing the person, and that means help. But it just made me think that I don't ever really go out, so I don't have an occasion to see people drunk and maybe needing help. But
well, I go to gay bars, so
it's also scary because everyone's out there inebriated, so they're not firing on all cylinders. And people are, I mean, the reason I don't go out is because people just act a damn fool. But it's like that also makes you very vulnerable, and then you do stuff that you probably shouldn't do because you've been drinking, and you're probably desperate because you've I mean, that's the other thing, is that you put yourself in situations where it's like you're desperate to interact. And then as the night goes on, and now the bar is closed, and now you're out there after the bar is closed trying to figure out what you're going to do next, you just get desperate and you're more pliable. So it's almost like having these symbols. I mean, you're really relying on some specific people to recognize them because everyone else is a mess. I just don't feel safe being out because who's supposed to take care of me? Not the other assholes drinking. Anyway, I thought that was a scary scene.
Yes, I agree.
The who says don't be that girl? Oh, her agent after the show. And then we, after Anna's character is able to get away, and then we see her in her apartment packing up, she gets a call from her agent, and she tells her, like, I'm leaving. And the agent says, don't be that girl who is on one stupid TV show and is never seen again, which is actually what happened to this woman, Cheryl Bradshaw. She stopped pursuing acting and led a private life somewhere else. Later in life, like after Randy was convicted and imprisoned, she did do, I think, 1 or 2 interviews talking about it, but for many years didn't really talk about it at all. But there are some documentaries about like some of the victims who survived, and like women who met him and obviously were not killed by him. It's just all very unsettling.
Peter Medak, who's a director I really like, did something for some crime television series starring Guillermo Diaz as Rodney Alcala in 2017.
But we learn at the very end that that 15-year-old girl who he didn't kill, and then she called the police and he got arrested. As far as the police knew, he was only in trouble for assaulting this young lady. So they gave him bail, and he was released on bail. And while he was released on bail, he killed 2 more women. That's crazy.
Yeah.
But we watched a special talking about sort of the differences between reality and the movie. But before we do that, what would you give
you haven't
Woman of the Hour?
You haven't talked about something you didn't like in this.
Oh, you're right. So probably the main, and I didn't even bring it up because I didn't like it. Nicolette Robinson plays a woman who shows up to that specific taping of the dating game with her boyfriend and his family. And so they sit in the audience, the show starts, and then she sees all of the bachelors, and she recognizes bachelor number 3, Randy. And she instantly becomes upset to the point where she starts shaking and then runs out of the studio to go sit in the car. Her boyfriend follows her, and then she explains that she knows that guy. Remember my friend who was raped and murdered? Well, he was the guy who was with her the day before at the beach. And I believe that he's the one who did that to her. And I tried to tell the police, but they couldn't find him. That's him. So then she goes, instead of like going to call the police, she goes to the security guard to ask to speak to a producer of the show because there's someone on the show who shouldn't be on it.
Mm-hmm.
That's what she says. So the security guard's like, sure, gal, here, come sit in this room. And the producer's George Eliot's going to come out.
Daughter of Middlemarch.
So she waits for a while, and then a janitor comes in to vacuum. And that's when she realizes no one's coming. So she tells the janitor, like, do you know George Eliot? He's a producer I'm supposed to talk to. And he's like, no, you're not. How you know? Because I'm George Eliot. The security guard likes to play pranks on me. So then she gets upset, storms out, and then we see she ultimately ends up at a police station, and she's kind of like poorly explaining what is happening, and the cops sort of get frustrated, and then she walks out. And then we learn that Anna Kendrick, that character is not a real character. It's sort of an amalgamation that's supposed to represent the women who tried to report Randy but weren't taken seriously.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the message is clear that this character represents women not being heard, but I think it was handled in a corny way.
I don't know. I didn't mind Ms. Robinson in this role. And, you know, you have to remember she'd already spoken to the police because her friend had been raped and murdered and probably felt like there was nothing was done. So I can see that a person like this might try to talk to the show's producer, maybe. But
you know what I think would have been better, since this is a fake character anyway?
Right.
Because another problem I had with the story is we don't know much about Randy. We see that he works at the LA Times, but we don't see where he lives. We don't get any background on him. So I was thinking, instead of having that Nicolette character be a lady who knew him sitting in the audience, I wish we would have had like maybe a neighbor in the apartment building he lived in.
Kind of like Niecy Nash and Dahmer?
Kind of, yeah. And then maybe she reported to the landlord, like, hey, that Randy guy's weird. Like, I've heard screaming in his apartment. I've heard, like, he came home bloody one day.
Mm-hmm.
And the landlord doesn't take her seriously. And then finally, when she says, no, really, I think he's a weirdo, the landlord goes, well, he just put in his notice he's leaving. So why bother? I feel like that would have felt more organic to me. But the whole, like, having a panic attack at the show, like, what are the odds that she even be in that audience? And why is she being so, like, why is she communicating so poorly as to what needs to happen? That frustrated me.
Sure, but yeah.
So those aspects of the story affect my score, but I still think this is an excellent movie.
I think they still, and they dropped that he was also taking pictures of men. And there's, at the Times, there's this young, what is he, an intern that he kind of creeps out as well.
Yeah, that was a good scene. Because he's like a handsome young man. And he's like, hey, see these pictures? Like, I want to take some of you up in the desert where I kill these other ladies. And the guy's already kind of like, you know, like I think what saved that kid is he wasn't gay, maybe. So he just already was like, I don't know.
But compare this to something
but then the police show up to question him, and that's when everyone's like freaked out, and that's when the guy is like, okay, I'm definitely not going with you.
But then we see a picture of him in the scrapbook when the young vagabond is looking through his work.
Right.
We see a picture of that man.
So maybe he did kill him. I don't know.
But compare this to something like He Went That Way with Zachary Quinto and Jacob Elordi about that serial killer Larry Raines.
That movie's so terrible.
But also taking this real life incident of a survivor, that's also kind of a very strange.
I really liked this approach of sort of having these two stories within one. I will say, if I could tweak it, because he may have been such a prolific killer, and for sure we know he killed 8 people, I kind of wish we would have shown more of his activity and then laced that with the dating game show, because on the dating game show, he's very charming.
Mm-hmm.
So how creepy would it have been to see him be this like cold-blooded murderer, but then right after that scene you see him cracking a really funny joke on the dating game. But as it is, it's still very effective. What would you give the movie?
I'm going to maintain a 4.
I would give Woman of the Hour 4 out of 5. Okay, so things we learned after we watched it about the real incident. When Randy Alcala was cast on the dating game, he was a convicted sex offender on parole.
Uh-huh.
That's crazy.
You know, it's nowadays, if that happened, you could sue the hell out of that show.
On the actual show, Cheryl she didn't rewrite the questions. So she definitely doesn't come off as smart as Anna Kendrick does.
Mm-hmm.
And then Rodney was not in the movie, he's bachelor number 3, but in reality he was bachelor number 1. The reason they switched it was to give it more
Suspense.
like more suspense that he's like the last one to be announced. But also Rodney on the actual show was nowhere near as charming or smart
Oh no!
as the character in the movie.
If you watch clips from the real answers, it's like, ugh.
It's kind of cringy. Rodney did work at the LA Times, but not as a photographer like the movie showed. He was actually a typesetter. We already mentioned that the Nicolette Robinson's character wasn't an actual person at the taping who had met him prior. She was an amalgamation of all the women who tried to speak out against him, like I said. Then in the movie, we see bachelor number 2 tell Cheryl, like, be careful of that asshole. But in reality, he did not whisper anything to her. And then the prize on the movie that they won was a trip to Carmel.
Mm-hmm.
But in reality, they received tennis lessons and then a trip to Magic Mountain.
Terrible.
Well, I'd prefer that than going on like a weekend getaway with a stranger. No, we can just take an hour's worth of tennis lessons and then go to Magic Mountain. And then in the movie, Cheryl goes out with Randy
for a drink
right away. But in reality, she did not do that because before she even left the studio, she told the producer, that guy creeps me out. Do I have to go to Carmel?
That's creepy.
And they told her, no, of course not. So she never actually hung out with him. And then in the movie, he gets caught because he picks up this homeless girl who we saw earlier, like stealing from a laundromat, and then takes her to the desert. But in reality, he got caught because he picked up a 15-year-old hitchhiker. And then they stopped to get gas and she reported him. But the way it plays out in the movie is kind of unbelievable because it would require that he stayed in the bathroom for like, 20, 30 minutes? Because she has time to run. We see her running down the highway to a restaurant, call the police.
And they show up.
And the police show up and he's still in the bathroom.
Mm-hmm.
I just can't believe that as we were watching the movie, I'm like, there's no way he just damn near killed this young girl, has her in the car, not tied up, and he spent that long in the bathroom. In reality, he was able to leave after the girl left, but the police caught up with him.
And let him out again.
And then we learned that Cheryl Bradshaw died right before the production of the film began, so she didn't get to see the final project. But yeah, I'm surprised that we haven't had a movie made about, like, something more notable made about this character before.
Yeah.
And I think Anna Kendrick did a really good job.
I mean, it's her debut.
Who wrote it?
Ian McDonald, I believe, is the screenwriter's name.
And is this their like first screenplay?
No, I don't believe so. But
very good work.
Oh yeah. Oh, and then I did look up. Sally Field indeed was on the dating game in 1966. So before she was Gidget.
Oh, did you ever watch Gidget?
I've never seen Gidget.
I used to watch reruns as a kid, and I did like her in Gidget. Although in later roles, she always came across so stuffy, and I wonder if that was just because she's kind of like a conservative lady.
I think
not politically, but just like she's,
I talk about like 80 for Brady.
Well, I mean, even Mrs. Doubtfire, although I still maintain that if you came home one day with a horse in the living room, it's curtains.
Yeah, it's a problem. We don't do that to our property, okay?
But don't you agree that she's always kind of been uptight in her roles?
Yes. Or what did you watch? An Eye for an Eye? Because I do think she is progressive person. I just she's prim and proper and a little dull. but a fantastic two-time Oscar-winning actress. I mean, she can give a great performance.
What's the one where Not Without My Daughter?
Yeah, with Alfred Molina. Yeah.
That's a good one to watch every now and then.
That is good. Although some stuff, I don't think Absence of Malice has aged very well.
Anyway, so next week, of course, Election Day. Please go out and vote.
Please.
We're going to see Gladiator 2 next week.
Yeah.
We're also going to see Nickel Boys.
Yep.
The reviews for Heretic and the Piano Lesson drop. We're also going to go to the Philosophical Research Society as guests, like just to watch a movie. We're going to watch something called Scarecrow in a Garden of Cucumbers, which is that title alone. The trailer showed during Scream Queen, the screening we were at. So when we were asked if we wanted to go, I said yes because I recall it being interesting. But do you recall that trailer at all?
Yes, yeah, because
I have no idea what this movie's about.
Well, it was unavailable forever. It's also very short. It's only like an hour 20. But it's, I think, the only feature to star Holly Woodlawn, playing a character named Eve Harrington. But Bette Midler and Lily Tomlin both have bit parts in it. But again, it's I don't know if this was like a holy grail of like queer cinema, but it definitely is something I'm kind of excited to see because I've never had the opportunity to.
Well, it's Wednesday, November 6th at 7:00 at the Philosophical Research Society. You can get tickets at Eventbrite. We'll be there if you want to say hi and bring us stuff.
Oh, God.
You can just slip me money like a bribe. I don't care. Anyway, are you reading anything?
I'm still reading I, Claudius because
you're slow.
No, I just haven't been allowed a lot of time to read.
Allowed? Who's holding you back? Yourself.
Okay.
Anything else you'd like to say?
No.
Ta-ta.